Okay, you can make yourself very comfortable. Diamond Sutra, you can see the Chinese version on that wall, is the most well-known scripture in Mahayana Buddhism. It's the core of all Buddha's teaching. Just like the diamond is the most precious among many jewels, this scripture, even though it's pretty short, it takes less than 40 minutes to read to the last chapter. But in order to grasp its real meaning, it takes decades, many lifetimes to understand what it really means. The original title of Diamond Sutra is Vajra Chetika Puranya Paramita Sutra. Sutra means scripture. Vajra, as last night Reverend Kim said, it is a diamond, or in Indian tradition, it is a thunderbolt. Chetika in Sanskrit means the color. Diamond is the analogy of our innate true nature. So the original title, Vajra Chetika Pranya Paramita Sutra, means the diamond cutter, cut our ignorance, eliminate our delusion, perfection of wisdom. Prajna, we chant the Heart Sutra, Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. Prajna means wisdom, particularly innate wisdom. Paramita means perfection. So, diamond cutter, perfection of wisdom scripture. The title means that. As we know, Shakyamuni Buddha was born as a prince in India 2,500 years ago. At the age of 25, he left the palace to search for universal truth. He practiced around 6 years in Himalayas, and at the age of 36, he attained the supreme enlightenment, or Anyuttara Samyak Sambhari. The Buddha would like to enter Nirvana, leave this world, even though he became so compassionate and would like to help many suffering people. But he thought when he tells what he experienced or what he was awakened to, nobody would believe his world. So he tried to leave this world, or para-nirvana, but a lot of heavenly beings asked the Buddha, world-honored one, but still there are some group of people, mature practitioners, who are on the verge of awakening. If you help them a little bit, they would get complete liberation. So Buddha agreed with that. And according to the legend, he stayed in samadhi for the following 3 weeks, meditating on how to deliver his message in the way the average mind can understand. So from the age of 36, for the first 8 years, he taught his Dharma, which is collected in Agama Sutra, Agama scripture. Agama Pali means foundation. This is the core scripture in Theravada Buddhism. For example, Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. These basic teachings was taught for the first 8 years. That's the first period. For the next 8 years, he taught Vaipula scripture. In the Chinese, we call it Pangdengjiang. Vaipula scripture. The content of those scriptures is basically about dependent arising, the Dharma of cause and effect. He taught that for the next 8 years. When Buddha became in his mid-50s, he started to talk prajna literature for 21 years. Very long time. Jesus taught for 3 years. Even for prajna literature, Shakyamuni Buddha taught 25 years. The Chinese translation of the prajna literature is around 600 volumes. Some of you who went to Korea saw the wooden block, 600 volumes. But it's too long. So scholars said, why don't we condense that in one essential scripture? So they say it's condensed in Diamond Sutra, whose world is around 5,000 or 6,000. Still, it's too long. It's condensed one more time. That is the Heart Sutra that we chant this morning. So the content is completely the same, whether it's a Heart Sutra or Diamond Sutra. When I was in regular college, I studied economics. So when I first read the Diamond Sutra, I have never read this kind of a book or scripture that does not make sense. From the beginning to the end, except the first 2 chapters, it's full of contradiction, self-contradictory. But for some unknown reason, I read that in the Chinese. I did not know what it means, not at all. But I started to cry when I first read the Diamond Sutra, probably just 30 years ago. And I felt like I saw or arrived my hometown where I have to dwell for good. Think about the shape of the earth. We learned in the elementary school the earth is around. They prove in various ways. But as long as we live on earth, we cannot see the earth is really round. In the science class, when the teacher showed us the picture of the earth that's taken from the moon, it's self-obvious. No need to explain. The earth is really, really round. Even though we cannot feel that, it does not seem in that way. Because we think from our thinking mind. Our mindset is so deeply shaped in that way. Our mindset, thinking mind. That's why this scripture is contradictory. It's appears not to make sense. When we leave this earth, let's say our sense of self, the Diamond Sutra repeatedly says the idea of ego entity, or notion of selfhood, we became free from our sense of self. Everything makes sense. Everything comes home. The first section, Buddha asked for alms and he washed his feet and arranged his seat and sat down. This introduction part, many Zen priests skip this chapter. Do you think this is just an introduction? But last night, as Reverend Kip said, this is the essence of the Diamond Sutra. It's so deep, so profound, that it looks so plain and ordinary. One Zen master said, when student asked to his teacher, what is the core teaching of this first section? He replied, honey is sweet, salt is salty. So we cannot grasp its deep meaning, so the next section follows to explain what is the ordinary mind, what is the ordinary life. So why don't we read it together, section 2 and 3. I will explain this morning, section 2 and 3. Yeah, all together.
Section 2, the Buddha makes a request. Let's read together. Now in the midst of the assembly was the venerable Buddha. Forthwith he arose, uncovered his right shoulder, knelt upon his right knee, and respectfully raising his hands with palms joined, addressed Buddha thus: world-honored one,
Thank you. Subhuti is one of the 10 chief disciples of the Buddha. He is said to have a profound insight into emptiness. So he's usually referred to as an elder Subhuti. The Tathagata, another name for Buddha, which literally means neither going nor coming. Bodhisattva is an ideal practitioner who searches for great enlightenment to save all sentient beings. And you can see all sentient beings, whatever is born from eggs, from wombs, and so on, that's Buddha categorized all sentient beings into 9 kinds. And the last sentence, ego entity, a person, sentient being, or long life. The translation is so different, so diverse. So you don't have to worry about it. What's important is the idea of ego entity. Based on that, what follows an idea, which means a false notion, idea of a person, sentient beings, or long life. You can read this handout after this lecture. As a representative of a practitioner, for example, this kind of a congregation, Subhuti asked to the Buddha. So, if I rephrase in modern way, his mind would like to become peaceful and centered, but his mind is constantly attracted to worldly things. How can I center my mind? Just like our question, very practical question. Even though Subhuti asked an ordinary question, I think Buddha replied in a very extraordinary way. Because if I were Buddha, I would reply, in order to center your mind, you needed to practice meditation more, for example. But Buddha's reply was completely different. He said, give rise to a great aspiration to save all sentient beings. Under that life goal or vow, your mind will settle down. Just like the lily of the song, you raise me up to more than I can be. He raised us more than we can see. Subhuti's question was a pretty Hinayanan style question. How can I center my mind? But Buddha replied in a very Mahayana manner. Save all sentient beings. That should be your life goal. That's why you come here. That's why you practice, why you live your life. Our founding master said the same thing. One of the disciples asked, by what method should I cultivate so that I may eliminate all the desires, focus single-mindedly on cultivating the way and lead a life of tranquility and comfort like the Buddha? Sotazan, the founding master of Won Buddhism, replied, rather than eliminating desires, you should expand them. Once your petty desires are transformed into a great vow, they will naturally subside as you focus on your vow. Then you will inevitably lead a life of tranquility and comfort. When I was in regular college, I had a friend who was very much attached to his grade, his academic achievement. He was really stressed out when he had 1 or 2 Bs. He's very sensitive, a very mentally, physically weak person. But when he became sophomore, he completely changed. We did not know what happened to him. He's not a religious or spiritual person. But he told me he eventually discovered this life goal. He started to be involved in students' demonstration movement, which was ideologically at the time very much inclined to communism, whose ideology was very popular in the early 80s. So his life was so much focused on that. So he's a very centered person, even though he did not spend 1 minute on meditation cushion. Let's just think about why our mind is wavering or attracted or distracted. When we see the root of our temptation or distraction, we are usually attached. We are distracted by so many worldly things. By worldly things, for example, comparing mind. We are attached to promotion, jealousy, or competition, etc. So, in our life, when our life goal is holy life goal is truly set, that's why we repeatedly chant Ilwansang vow, then we will become very centered and peaceful life. Our value system, our life goal is very much important for that. So later, you can read what you received. So our founding master classified external concentration and calmness and internal concentration and calmness. For example, when we practice chanting, when we practice sitting meditation, it's related with internal concentration and calmness. It works, it beautifully works. But it's half of the story. Think about Saint Paul. He did not practice meditation like a Zen priest, but he could endure all kinds of hardships with great joy and peace because he discovered his life goal to spread the gospel of Jesus. So external concentration and calmness come from when we give rise to a great vow or when we give rise to a great faith, etc. So when you are so vulnerable and sensitive, you are too much tempted by so many things, reflect your life goal. We want a lot of things, but what do I really, really want eventually? That's the lesson of section 2. Save not all people, all sentient beings. I think it's really, from one perspective, not realistic vow. It's infinite compassion. So bodhisattva is not necessarily some particular person. It's the quality of our mind. And sometimes we become bodhisattva. Sometimes we forget about our bodhisattva within ourselves. However big a tree is, it starts from a very small seed. The seed of attaining Buddhahood, great enlightenment, always starts from a seed of our vow. Our vow. There is no exception. So our third head Dharma master, Venerable Dosung, said, when the thought of a true vow arises, it will pierce the whole universe. When a repentant mind arises, the whole universe will be purified. Did you see our cat Hemi this morning? Think about that. If a Hemi think to itself, even though I am very ordinary cat, someday I will become a great person and do a great things for this world. I have to save all people. If you know his mind, then probably a lot of people would like to take care of him so that he will eventually accomplish his vision. Likewise, even though it is invisible, the seed is in our mind, in our soul, the universe will help us. The universe will become a greater provider as long as we have that solid seed. Okay, the next verse, yet when vast, uncountable, immeasurable numbers of beings have been liberated, verily no being has been liberated. Okay, here comes the part that gives us a headache. We know as a common sense, Buddha saved so many sentient beings. Buddha taught to his followers. The number of sentient beings after he attained great enlightenment, probably before the earth was created, is more than the number of leaves in the whole world, he said. But the Diamond Sutra says, verily, truthfully speaking, no being has ever been liberated. This is what we contemplate this morning. Chapter 25. Why don't we read all together chapter 25? Yeah. The same, message. Section 25. Subhuddhi, what do you think? Let no one say the Tathagata challenges the idea. I must liberate all living beings. Allow no such thought, Subhuddhi. Wherefore, because in reality there are no living beings to be liberated by the Tathagata. If there were living beings from the Tathagata to liberate, he would partake in the idea of selfhood, person, and sentient being. Subhuddhi, though the common people accept ego as real, the Tathagata declares that ego is not different from non-ego. Subhuddhi, those whom the Tathagata refers to as common people are really common people. Such is really a name. Common people, sentient beings here means unawakened beings, ignorant beings. So let me ask you, what is sentient beings? What is unawakened person? how can you define, Kelvin, how unawakened people, how do you?
Future Buddha.
Okay. Kathy? Oops. Okay. Okay, think about some actress like Nicole Kidman. She's a great actress. She can play very ordinary housewife. She plays that role very well. Sometimes she plays very arrogant, extravagant dancer. Or she can play depressed, intelligent, like Virginia Woolf. She plays all roles. What is the true personality of Nicole Kidman? In this movie, she played this role. In that movie, the true personality of Nicole Kidman is the personality that she has in her daily life at all? I don't think so. Our personality is also constantly changing. In other words, there is no such fixed, true personality, whether it's Nicole Kidman or Dosung or Daesun or Stephen. So our true nature is empty. Just like, do you know how you can listen my word? Well, you do not have to struggle because your mind is empty. How can I speak comfortably now? My mind is empty. Because this space is empty, this voice or vibration is delivered to your eardrum. So whether it's a mental thing or a physical thing or emotional thing, the nature is empty. So you can contemplate the Diamond Sutra. When we practice sitting meditation, we all go very deep in meditation without any wandering thoughts. Then we are all the same person, Buddha. But when we leave our meditation cushion and are involved in daily activities, depending on some thought that arises in our mind, we become a different person and unawakened beings. As for Buddha, they act based on the thought that arises from pure awareness. But our thoughts arise being influenced by greed, anger, and delusion, whose root is our sense of self. That's the division of awakened and unawakened being. But essentially, we are the same person. Even though we cannot deeply feel that. Whether it's cloudy or not, the sky is the sky. The space does not change. So, what is enlightenment? Or Buddha said, I will liberate all sentient beings into nirvana. What is a liberation or what is a salvation? It is delivering unawakened suffering person to nirvana, the state of no suffering. But enlightenment is restoring our true self. It's restoring what we already have. Enlightenment is the translation of the Korean word 깨다, 깨치다. 깨다 literally means awakening. Awakening from dream. So Buddha used the analogy. Unawakened people are just like drunken people. They sleep in his house, but he did not know it's his house. When he was awakened, he discovered the same furniture, the same bed, the same desk, the same door, etc. Nothing has been changed. But what changed is a sleepy, unawakened state of mind to awakened mind. That's why Buddha said repeatedly, I have not attained any dharma. Any dharma. Let me read. Subhuti asked the Buddha, world honored one, in the attainment of the consummation of incomparable enlightenment, did the Buddha make no acquisition whatsoever? Buddha replied, just so, Subhuti. Through the consummation of incomparable enlightenment, I acquired not even the least thing. Therefore, it is called the consummation of incomparable enlightenment. So you need to meditate on that. Yeah. I usually use this analogy. I cannot, the Catskill mountain peak is not that visible. Okay. Attaining Buddhahood is, we start from the foot of the mountain. It's the level of a sentient being, ignorant beings. The peak is the level of a Buddhahood. Peak, valley, different name. It's the opposite thing. Sentient beings, Buddha. But think about that. Does the peak, can the peak exist without the valley? How can the valley exist without the peak? When you go up, when does the valley stop to become a valley and start to become a peak? Okay, you can look at my nose. Nose, cheek. When I move my finger from nose to this cheek, where on my face does the nose stop to become nose and become a cheek? We cannot tell. It's just the face. Two names of different name. Two names for one reality. It's like light and darkness, the mind of the Buddha, light. Darkness, the mind of a sentient being. It's not too different. Conceptually, it appears too different. But darkness is, by its definition, the absence of light. It's the same thing. Likewise, Buddha, sentient beings, they are just names. In reality, it is neither sentient beings nor Buddha. That's the teaching of that. But the problem is we are affected by this concept and the names. We know Big Dipper. Big Dipper. Each and every culture name Big Dipper in a very different way. When you see the night sky, it is very hard not to see Big Dipper. Big Dipper and the other constellation. That's what we see. Why? Because we learned the Big Dipper and the concept became embedded in our mind. If you have never heard of a Big Dipper, for example, you're born in Africa, did not go to elementary school, it's just stars. Huh? But Big Dipper and other constellations, that's how we view the night sky. It's not the reality. Why? Our mind becomes deluded by concept and the names. So from the beginning to the end, get rid of the concept. Let go of all the names. It's the teaching of the Diamond Sutra. One cannibal, one person from human eating, board an airplane with a little girl. And stewardess asked him, well, she's a little girl, but she has to pay the ticket, half of the price. Then the cannibal replied, do I have to pay for my lunch? So to the cannibal, she's a lunch. To the stewardess, she's a passenger. So for us, this is we call the pen. To him, it does not mean anything. It can be just a toy. Yeah? So names concept does not reflect reality. So as the Heart Sutra says, the first teaching, human life is a suffering, the first noble truth. The second noble truth is there must be some cause. That is attachment, the second noble truth. The third noble truth is a cessation of suffering, to cease the suffering. That's our life direction. And the fourth, Buddha suggested the eightfold path to cease suffering. That's what we learn, the basic teaching of the Buddha. That's prajna, wisdom. That really makes sense. Eh? We can apply that. But Heart Sutra or the Diamond Sutra says, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path. Four noble truth in the absolute sense does not exist. For example, well, I broke my ankle. It's very painful. But you are really absorbed in something, whether it's a computer game or a soccer game, you forget about it. So it's not real, actually. It's up to our mind. Eightfold the path to liberation, but when we really arrive home, we are already there. There is no path. That is the teaching of the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. So these are prajna, but prajna, paramita, perfection of wisdom is different. Perfection of wisdom. The Diamond Prajna Paramita Sutra. That's the ultimate teaching. Only when we reveal from our mind, from our life, this true diamond, innate wisdom, the realization of our true self, we can have indestructible, everlasting happiness. That's why it is, the analogy is diamond. Okay, let me continue tomorrow, the next section. Okay, thank you.